news broadcaster in Gaza. And what happened in Gaza was really a catastrophe in many ways. And those worldwide who had access to the pictures and the stories done by Al Jazeera, and we made it widely available to other broadcasters, became aware of that catastrophe. When you have 1,500 people killed in a population of 1.5 million, it's equivalent to 30,000 being killed here in Canada, or 300,000 being killed in the United States. 300,000 in the United States on a per capita basis. And remember, it was 3,000 who died at 9/11. So the catastrophe that occurred in Gaza was something that we felt the world should know. But the distinctiveness of Al Jazeera's coverage was not only that we covered the Gaza side, we also covered extensively the Israeli side. Al Jazeera has its largest international bureau is actually in Israel, based in Jerusalem. Al Jazeera English and Arabic are broadcast on Israeli cable stations. In fact, the BBC was dropped from the leading cable provider in Israel in favor of Al Jazeera English. And the reason I think Al Jazeera is so popular in Israel is because the channel gives so much attention to the Middle Eastern story. And Israelis are smart enough to know that they need to understand the totality of coverage. And the point that's been made often in Israel is that Israeli government spokespeople appear on Al Jazeera unfiltered, appear on Al Jazeera more than any network in the world outside of Israel. It's difficult, again, as one talks about Al Jazeera without kind of describing how it's organized. What I found extraordinary when I started working for it is that, again, to a Canadian, it's very familiar. It's a public broadcaster, very much like the CBC, like the BBC in Britain. It's a network that is funded by the government, in this case, the government of Qatar. There's a firewall between the government of Qatar and Al Jazeera. In the 8 months I've been there hasn't been an inkling of inappropriate influence or any contact, actually, whatsoever with the government. And I think that's liberating. I think that the same applies, I think, in most cases, on the good days, both in Canada and in Britain. But I think it's something that is often misunderstood. What I'd like to do is just so that you have a sense of what it looks like, I'd like to kind of go to a video, just a few minutes, which kind of gives you a sense of the channel and its historical roots. Gaza, 2009. Al Jazeera was the only international English-language broadcaster reporting from both sides of the conflict. The hallmark of Al Jazeera journalism: every angle, every side. Afghanistan, 2001. The same uncompromising and fearless reporting. In the wake of 9/11, American forces attacked the Taliban in Afghanistan. They denied civilians were also being killed. Al Jazeera, as the only news organization in Afghanistan, reported otherwise.
We know that Al Jazeera has a pattern.
Shortly afterwards, the U.S. military bombed Al Jazeera's bureau in Kabul. Award-winning correspondent Raghi Omar was there for the BBC on that day. Raghi is now a presenter and correspondent for Al Jazeera English.
Al Jazeera started out in 1996 as the first ever TV channel to provide comprehensive, independent television news and debate for the Arab world. Since then, the Al Jazeera satellite channel has scooped, broken and reported stories worldwide, reaching over 50 million viewers and becoming one of brandchannel.com's most impactful television news brands globally. By 2006, the original Arabic channel expanded to become the international media network that it is today, and now reaching over 130 million households in over 100 countries around the world. Al Jazeera English. Live 24/7 and via their Doha hub, Al Jazeera English broadcast centers go to air as their audiences tune in. From Kuala Lumpur, Doha, London and Washington DC, international headlines and the latest news with correspondents from every continent and for every continent.
Behind us, the gunfire that you're hearing to my right are the pro-government supporters.
The Russians said they weren't in Gori. This is the proof they were.
The problem here is that there is not enough food for everyone.
With over 60 bureaux worldwide, the Al Jazeera network mission is to show every angle and every side of every issue that's newsworthy. With people at the heart of the story, Al Jazeera's fearless journalism gives a voice to the voiceless.
Very, very dangerous government.
Police won't let us film, and as you can see, they're trying to take the camera off of us right now.
Live news on the hour, every hour.
Thank you, London. Thanks, Washington.
With in-depth analysis and comments as events unfold.
I love the cut and thrust of smart debate.
And Al Jazeera's news is interactive through its comprehensive websites and new media initiatives, with live streaming and chat rooms on YouTube and Live Station. And scheduled for every time zone, up-to-the-moment current affairs and documentary programs.
Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World.
And the bombs keep falling.
America has survived slavery, it has survived racism, and the proof of it is Obama.
Cutting-edge issues, hard-hitting reports, and entertaining features, building bridges between cultures.
Al Jazeera TV is a perfect example of that. How do we open up the doors so that you can see what these cultures are and understand that the differences are not so much?
Al Jazeera English is the first global TV news channel in the world to be based in the Southern Hemisphere. We break news from some of the world's most underreported regions. For example, Al Jazeera is the only international news broadcaster to have a permanent bureau in Zimbabwe, allowing the world to see the awful conditions there.
Out here, if you aren't a known ZANU-PF supporter, you're a target.
We are frequently the first and often the only broadcaster to reach and report from some of the world's worst tragedies. We provide a different perspective, focused on people, their stories, and their relationship with power. Power is shifting in this 21st century world, and Al Jazeera is in hot pursuit. Africa, Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and the Americas. We try to let this diverse and changing world tell its own stories. And we believe that that is what's needed and wanted now more than ever.
This was, until a few moments ago, an entirely peaceful protest. They're getting the bricks ready. It seems as if they intend to fight.
This is definitely the worst anybody has seen in Gaza.
I was interviewing the leader, and then suddenly he declared that I was formally being taken hostage.
The fighting goes on, plumes of smoke rising there.
You'll recall the reference on the tape to Afghanistan, to the fact that the Americans bombed the Al Jazeera headquarters after it reported in November 2001, shortly after 9/11, that contrary to claims that civilians were in fact being killed in the bombing of the Taliban. It was really that moment that the tide turned in the U.S. against Al Jazeera. If you go back into the files between 1996, when it was created, until November 2001, Al Jazeera actually was the poster child for efforts in the Arab world to take on the Arab dictators and the incredible suppression of press freedom. And there are countless statements from the State Department, from Western governments between 1996 and November 2001, pointing to Al Jazeera as exactly the kind of network, given its fearlessness, given the fact that over that period it had been thrown out of probably about 6 or 7 Arab countries for taking on the Arab dictators. But it turned in November 2001 for what I think are arguably are clear kind of political reasons. And from then on, a stigma was attached, particularly in the U.S., and I think sadly that was spread into Canada somewhat.